In this video, you're going to work with partnership accounts. Firstly, you'll solve question number 13 from May 2023 paper 1 exam. Then you'll solve 6 multiple choice questions which tests your knowledge with various concepts in partnership. It is highly recommended that you take time to thoroughly work through each question and understand them properly so that way you can guarantee full marks for yourself in the main exam. So with that being said, let's get started. Angela, Bennett, and Christoph are in partnership. The partnership agreement states that interest and capital is provided at 5.5% based on the balances of the partner's capital account at the year end. Now, when it comes to interest and capital, this is something that the business provides to the partners for all the capital that they have invested during the year. Interest on drawings is provided at 6% of the balances on the partner's drawings account at the end of the year. So drawings are something that are made by the partners from the business. And whenever a partner makes a drawing from the business, the partner is liable to pay interest on these drawings to the business. Salaries of £28,000 per annum for Angela and Bennett only. So out of the 3 partners, 2 of the partners, Angela and Bennett, each take £28,000 per year as salaries. The profits and losses are shared in proportion to the balances on the partner's capital account at the end of the year. The following information has been extracted from the trial balance at 31 May 2022. So here you can see we are given the balances for the capital account and for the drawings for Angela, Bennett, and Christoph. And the interest and capital is calculated based on these balances which are given to us at year end. So is the interest in drawings, which is derived based on these balances for drawings that we are given for each of the individual partners at the end of the year. So the additional information, the income statement for the year ended 31 May 2022 showed a profit of £47,000 before any appropriations. This £47,000 in profit belongs to the business prior to any appropriations such as interest and capital being subtracted or interest and drawings being added or salaries being deducted, which is what you'll see we'll be doing when we solve the question later. The opening balance on Bennett's current account at 1 June 2021 was £5,298 debit. Now, what does an opening balance for a current account as a debit mean? If it's a debit opening balance, this means that the partner, which in this case is Bennett, owes money to the partnership. Now, what is the purpose of preparing a current account? Now, always remember that current account is a part of the equity account for each partner. And the purpose of preparing a current account is to simply track the individual withdrawals and contributions that have been made during the year. So if the opening balance on the current account is a debit, that should imply that more withdrawals have been made compared to contributions, and therefore the partner who has made these withdrawals will owe money to the partnership. So if the opening balance was a credit for the current account, that would mean the partnership owes money to the partner. Okay, so the requirement of the question is to prepare the current account for Bennett and showing the relevant balances brought down at 1 June 2022. So we have been provided with an outline for a T account for Bennett. So because we're preparing a current account, which is part of your equity account, anything on the credit side should increase the equity of the business. And how can we increase the equity of the business? This comes from any contributions or any additional amount that has come into Bennett's equity during the year. When it comes to the debit side will normally reflect any withdrawals and relevant interest that's paid on those withdrawals. And the debit side also reflects a reduction in the equity. Because the current account is part of your equity account, by default, anything on the credit side should reflect an increase in equity, and anything on the debit should therefore reflect a decrease in equity of this individual partner that we are preparing this account for. So let's start with filling in the information. So starting with the opening balance, you can see I've written balance brought down of £5,298, and I have done that on the debit side based on the first information that's been given here. Second information that's been given here, the opening balance on Bennett's current account at 1 June 2021 was £5,298 debit, which again means that Bennett owes money to the partnership. So this is what is being reflected here on the debit side as the opening balance. We also know that during the year, Bennett receives money in the form of salary, which is £28,000 per annum, as you can see here. So this salary that Bennett is receiving is like a contribution that's adding to the current account, or in other words, it's increasing the equity within the current account. So therefore, the salary is being reflected on the credit side, which is £28,000. We also know that interest on capital is given by the business at 5.5% based on the end of year balances. So let's go to the balance for capital account for Bennett. So Bennett had an end of year capital account balance of £45,000, and Bennett is going to receive 5.5% on this capital that Bennett has invested in the business, and the partnership, which is the business, is going to give this 5.5% to Bennett. So what we have to do in this case to calculate the interest on capital is to multiply 5.5% on the 45,000 investment of capital that Bennett has made, and that should give us £2,475 as the interest on capital relevant to Bennett's contribution during the year. Again, the interest on capital is something that Bennett is receiving from the business, which is therefore increasing the equity and is therefore reflected on the credit side, as you can see I have done here. Let's go on to the drawings part. Now, as we already understand, anything on the debit side should reflect a reduction in equity. And in most cases, it would be relevant to withdrawals and relevant interest that is being paid on these withdrawals by the partner. Starting with the drawings of £12,000. This is something we have extracted from the second table that's given here. So as you can see, drawings for Bennett for the year ended 31 May 2022 is £12,000, which is what is being reflected on the debit side for the current account. We also know that if the partner makes the drawings, then the partner is liable to pay 6% on these drawings that the partner is making from the business. So the interest on drawings in this case is calculated by simply applying the 6%, which is the rate that we have been given in the question, and that's multiplied on the £12,000 of drawings that Bennett has made during the year, which is £720. All right, so how did we derive the share of loss here? So we have to do some calculations to come up with that number. So starting with the profit for the year. So the profit for the year is £47,000 based on the additional information, number one, which gives us the profit of £47,000 for the partnership prior to any appropriations. So this is what we have done here. Then we have added interest and drawings of $2,940. First of all, why are we adding interest and drawings? Obviously, we understand that this is part of the appropriation account, and you can memorize this formula simply. But logically speaking, interest on drawings is something that the partners owe to the business for any withdrawals that they have made during the year. So therefore, the appropriation account, which is prepared from the perspective of the business knows that it is going to receive money from the partners due to the drawings that they have made during the year. So how did we derive the interest and drawings of $2,940? So first of all, based on the table that's given here, we first need to calculate the total drawings for all three partners, which is to add 11,000 with 12,000 and then add a further £26,000. So this is what we have done here. So the total drawings for all three partners is £49,000. And the interest on these drawings has been derived by simply multiplying 6% on this 49,000, which should give you £2,940 as the interest on drawings. Then we have subtracted interest on capital. Why have we subtracted interest on capital? Interest on capital is something that the business provides to its partners for all the capital investment that they have made during the year. So let's calculate that as well. So first of all, we want to find the total capital. So let me just quickly show you the calculations here. So how did we find the total capital to begin with? So we added every investment that has been given here in the second table. So we added 67,000 with 45,000 with 38,000. So let's do that. 67,000 plus 45,000 plus 38,000. So that should give us 150,000 pounds as the total investment in capital that has been made by all three partners combined. Given that the interest in capital is provided by the business at 5.5% on all capital investments, so we just simply used 5.5% and multiplied it with 150,000 pounds, and we arrived at 8,250 pounds as the interest in capital. So because the interest in capital is something that the partnership will provide to the partners, that should be taken out from the profits, and therefore we are subtracting it here. So interest in capital of 8,250 pounds is being subtracted. As you can see, I've put it in brackets. Then we know that salaries are only given to Angela and Bennett. So the salary is 28,000 pounds per annum for each partner, which accumulates to a total of 56,000 pounds for Angela and Bennett combined. So that is what's happening here. Salaries obviously will have to be paid out from the profit that the partnership has made. So therefore, we are subtracting salaries as well, which is 56,000 pounds, and I've kept that within brackets to reflect the subtraction. Once we have done that, we can see that the business, the partnership, has made a loss because we have a negative balance of 14,310 pounds. So prior to all these appropriations for capital, drawings, and salaries, we know that the business or the partnership made a profit of 47,000 pounds. But after all these appropriations have been factored in, we can see that the remaining balance for distribution among all the partners is indeed a loss, which is 40,310 pounds. Okay, so based on the first table, we know that profits and losses need to be distributed in proportion to the balance on the partner's capital account at the end of the year. So what does that mean? So let me show you some calculations here. We know that the total capital invested is 150,000 pounds within the business. 67,000 belongs to Angela, 45,000 belongs to Bennett, and Christoph has invested 38,000 pounds. So what I have to do is first calculate the proportion on how we should divide the losses in this case, which the question explicitly mentioned to divide it on the capital based on the balances of capital at year end. So let's just do that. So Angela's proportion will be calculated by taking the investment that Angela has made and dividing it over the total capital. So this is the proportion of investment that Angela has made out of the total capital. Then we will do the same thing for Bennett. And I'm just going to write Bennett's proportion in short, so which is 45,000 divided by 150,000. And I'll do the same for Christoph, which is to simply take Christoph's investment of 38,000 and then dividing it with the total of 150,000. Okay, so the loss of 14,310 that we have derived here will now be allocated based on the proportion that we have prepared here. So just simply, because we're concerned with Bennett, we just simply multiply 14,310 with whatever proportion we have derived for Bennett, and that should give us 4,293 pounds, which is the loss that Bennett is going to share among the total loss of 14,000 from the total loss of 14,310 pounds with all the remaining partners. Okay, so this loss, because the business has made a loss and Bennett is obviously sharing this loss, because you have made a loss, it should obviously reflect a reduction in equity and is therefore included on the debit side. As you can see, share of loss of 4,293 pounds for Bennett. Okay, now, so How did we arrive at this balance carried down of 8,164? Very simple. We added everything on the heavier side, which is the credit side to begin with, which was £30,475, which must be the same balance on the debit side to ensure that both the debits and credits are equal. And the deficit of 8,164 was calculated as the balance that needs to be carried down to make sure that we have equal debits and credits of £30,475. Once that has been done, we transfer this carried down balance to the next financial year as the opening balance of £8,164 based on the requirements in the question as they have asked us to do it for the next financial year. And because the opening balance is on the credit side for the new financial year, that means now that the partnership owes money to Bennett. Okay. Now that we have solved question number 13 from the past exam paper, let's look into the multiple choice questions for partnership that we're going to practice today. So starting with the first question here. In which account should a partner's drawings appear in the partnership's end of year financial statements? All right. So we have just prepared a current account a while ago for Bennett, and you have clearly seen that within the current account, we have included drawings on the debit side. So the question asking us to answer where the partner's drawings will be included, the current option to select easily in this case would be option D, which is the partner's current account. Now, there is another thing that you may wonder here. What about the appropriation account? If you remember, in the appropriation account, we do not include the drawings explicitly. We include the interest on the drawings. So don't be confused and make a mistake during the exam. If the question has said, which account should the interest on drawings be included, you could talk about the appropriation account or the current account in that case. But because the question is asking about drawings, that should be only reflected within the current account. And the purpose of the current account is to simply track the individual partners' withdrawals and contributions that have been made during the year. So the first answer for question number 1 is option D. So let's move to question number 2. X and Y are in partnership. Their income statement and appropriation account shows the following. So here we have been provided a table with some relevant information to this question. And what we are required to do is to find the profit for the partnership prior to any appropriations. Okay, so here I have created an appropriation account, and the main requirement in this question is to find this value, which is the profit for the year. So let me make a note here. Okay, so this is what we are required to find, this amount. Okay, so to begin the question, let's assume that we do not have this amount given to us as we are calculating that. So if we were to prepare the appropriation account, we start with the profit for the year. Then we subtract interest and capital. Again, why are we subtracting interest and capital? Because this is what the business will provide to its partners based on the investment that the partners have made into the business. And this has to be taken out from the profits that the business will make. So therefore, we are subtracting interest and capital. Interest and capital is £2,400. As you can see, I'm subtracting by putting it in brackets. And I've got this number from here, interest and capital of £2,400. All right. Then we have added interest and drawings because this is what the partners will provide to the business based on the withdrawals that they have made during the year. And this is £900 I'm adding here. And again, that's coming from the information that we have been provided in this table. Then we're subtracting salaries of £5,000. Again, very straightforward, coming from the information given in the table. All this, when it's sorted, should give us the remaining profit that we will be distributing to our partners, which is also known as the residual profit. And that is £12,000 based on whatever information we are given in the table. Now, what we had to do simply was to use algebra and find the missing number here that would eventually end up giving us £12,000. So All these four options that you have been given here, you can simply start by using the first option, which is 18,500, and using it here, and then subtracting 2,400, adding 900, and subtracting 5,000, and you will see that it indeed gives you the residual profit of 12,000 pounds. So a bit of algebra is needed here to answer this question correctly. So let's show something here. 18,500. So that is the correct answer. So if the partnership profit was 18,500 pounds and we had subtracted 2,400 pounds in interest and capital and added 900 pounds in interest and drawings, followed by a further deduction of 5,000 pounds in salaries, you should be left with the remaining or residual profit of 12,000 pounds. And therefore, on that basis, the correct option would be to select option A. Now, you see how within this question, we have factored in all this information except for the first two, which relates to the depreciation of non-current assets and interest and loan. All right. You see I've made a note here, which says that this has been already included in profit calculation. What I'm trying to say here is that this profit of 18,500 pounds that the partnership has made, this profit was obviously derived based on income and expenses that the partnership has during the year. So the depreciation and the interest is part of the expense which has already been included for deriving this profit of 18,500. So depreciation was included as an expense, so was the interest on loan that was included in the expense, and that's how we ended up with the partnership profit of 18,500 already. Okay, so we do not really need to include these two information as part of the preparation of creating this appropriation account, so nothing to worry about in this case. So let's move on to question number 3. So John and Mary are in partnership. After the first year of operation, the current accounts of both partners had a debit balance. Again, as we have just learned this earlier in the previous question, if the current account balance is debit, then that means that partners owe money to the business. And if the current account balance is credit, that would mean the partnership owes money to the partners. What might have caused this debit balance? Okay, so what we're going to do here is picture the current account. You know, anything on the debit side of the current account reflects a reduction in equity, and anything on the credit side of the current account reflects a reduction, reflects an increase in equity. Okay, so our focus is on the debit side. So we see on the debit side, we have been given the drawings, which is option number 1. We also have losses, which is option number 2. Salaries act as a contribution and increases equity, which is what is shown on the credit side. Therefore, the correct option to select in this case is option number 1 and 2, which fits in B. So 1 and 2 only. Again, this is very basic, but it tests your understanding of using the current account properly and understanding what things need to be included within the current account, so that way you can ensure that you're not making any mistakes and getting full marks in your exam. Okay, so let's move on to question number 4. Something similar to what we have done in question number 2 for our multiple choice questions here. The following information is available for a partnership at the end of the financial year. Again, the question is asking how much was the profit for the year. In other words, the question is asking what is the profit for the partnership. So we have again created an outline for the appropriation account to begin with. So the profit for the year, as you can see, 20,300 pounds in red is something that we derived at the end. So let's just assume to begin with that this amount is not there. What we have done is added the interest and drawings of 700, and then we have subtracted the interest and capital of 27,000 pounds based on the information that's given here, and then we subtracted salaries of 5,000 pounds, and the residual loss, which is the remaining amount, is 3,000. And you see I have used this as a negative because this is a loss that the question has explicitly mentioned. If you had just written 3,000 rather than minus 3,000, then you would be making a mistake in your exam. So be very careful with what you're doing. Because we have a loss here, make sure to show it within brackets or to write -3,000 at least. Then we want to know which of these four options fit in this profit for the year, and that should eventually give us a loss of -3,000 at the end. Once you do this correctly, you will see that the correct option to select would be £28,300, which when added with 700 and subtracted £27,000 and £5,000 from, will end up giving us a loss of -3,000 as the final balance. Okay. Again, I forgot to mention, you should be able to download all these questions from the link that I'll be giving in the description. So make sure to check those links and practice these questions again. Let's move on to question number 5. The following information is available for the partnership of Atul and Mansoor at 31 December. So we have two partners, Atul and Mansoor. So here within this table, we're given the profit of the partnership prior to any appropriations, the salary given to Atul, the drawings made by Atul and Mansoor, and the interest in capital that is given to Atul and Mansoor. Residual profits are shared between Atul and Mansoor in the ratio of 2:1. What is Mansoor's share of total profit for the year? So the first thing that we have done on the right-hand side here is to create an outline for the appropriation account and to find the profit that we will be eventually distributing to the partners based on the ratio that we're given in this question. So to begin with, we have taken £60,000 as the profit prior to appropriations. Then we have subtracted the salary of £9,000 based on what we have done so many times today. And then we have subtracted the interest in capital of £900 because we understand that the interest in capital is something that the business will be providing to its partners from the profit that it makes. So on that basis, the residual profit or the remaining balance available for distribution is £50,100. So how are we going to divide this £50,100 available for distribution? We first need to calculate the sum of the ratios, which is to add the 2 with 1, and we have 3. Then this sum of the ratios will be used as the main base to calculate the relevant proportion for each partners. So Atul's share is 2/3 based on the ratio is given here. Atul accounts for 2 while Mansoor accounts for 1 out of the total of 3. So Atul's share in this case is 2/3. Mansoor's share will therefore be 1/3. So, having said that, given that the profit available for distribution is 50,100, Mansoor's share of profit can be derived by simply taking 1/3 and multiplying it with the remaining profit available for distributions, and on that basis we get 16,700, which is option A. All right. So let's move on to the last question, which is question number 6. Information about the final accounts of a partnership is given. As you can see within this table, we are given the net profit before interest, which is £160,000. Then we have the interest on bank loan, which is £14,000. We also have been provided with the interest and capital accounts of 15,000, drawings and the salaries. Question is asking, what is the remaining balance of profits to be distributed or appropriated amongst the partners? Okay, first of all, the profit that we're given here is not the final profit of the partnership because we have an interest. It clearly mentions here that this profit is before the interest has been taken away. So what we have to do first is take the original draft profit of £160,000 and subtract the interest expense of £14,000, which gives us £146,000 as the main profit that we have prior to any appropriations. Then we subtract the interest and capital based on what we have learned already before. So we are subtracting 15,000 in interest and capital, and we are subtracting a further 24,000 for salaries based on the information that's given here. On that basis, we get a residual profit of £107,000, straightforward, and on that basis, the correct option to select would be option number B. Okay, So be careful. You can have many twists or complications within the multiple choice questions or your main questions during your exam, but it shouldn't be hard at all. You can definitely get full marks. All that matters is practice, practice, and practice. So that's all for today's lesson. I believe you found a lot of value in this content. Don't forget to drop a like and subscribe to this channel. I will see you in the next video.